Hey, this is Dusty Wells
And this is Dave Clark.
with I Love to Tell the Story podcast, and we really do love to tell the
We
stories.
do love to tell the story. Hey, you are about to watch something pretty amazing. Normally, we keep our episodes in 1 hour. This one goes way long. I would encourage you to take a break when you need it, but it gets better and better the longer that you watch. And it is with
Duane Allen of the Oak Ridge Boys, and I'm telling you what, it is an amazing, amazing interview.
Sit Back and Enjoy.
You know, we've had a lot of great guests, and I know a lot of them will still listen, but tonight I feel like this, and we've had some great people who we've said were trendsetters, legends. This to me is a real legend here tonight, and it's somebody that I love his heart, and I haven't known him for very long, but I followed him because of the different people we know. But we have the most amazing artist and just a great man, Duane Allen of the Oak Ridge Boys.
Thank you.
And I'm thrilled.
Appreciate it.
Thrilled. So I'm like a little kid. But I see you over there. You are too.
You know, I was like that before I ever joined the Oak Ridge Boys. And I remember one time in 1964, I was at the Texas Hotel in Dallas, and Smitty Gatlin came over and sat down with me, and we always got this gravy on toast after the show, and everybody went there. Well, Smitty came over and he asked me what I was doing, what's going on in my life. I told him I had another semester to finish in college, and I had to do some teaching for a semester to get my teacher's certificate. And I wanted to do that because back then a lot of the singers were not lasting that long.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll just get me a teacher's certificate, and I might wind up in some junior college or small college coaching basketball and teaching music in the daytime, and find me a nice place to land if this doesn't work, because I love basketball. And I love it almost as much as I love music. But I knew that I had to do music some way, somehow. And so I trained for it. And I think probably the first 2 years of my college life were probably very, very important. Next to the music, they were the most important days because I was running from studying classical music. I didn't really see myself going into missionary work like my brother did before me and graduated from the same schools. And my sister, who became a teacher, and she graduated from the same universities. And so all three of us graduated from what is now East Texas A&M in Commerce, Texas.
Yeah.
And that was a vocal emphasis college, right? Do you
Right.
remember that?
They were more into vocal work, like North Texas State is known for its bands. And East Texas State, now East Texas A&M, is known for its vocal department. And I think the reason is because we would have people from the Metropolitan Opera come there to get their doctorate. And while they were there, they would take on pupils and students. And I got to study with R.G. Webb, who was the lead tenor on the Metropolitan Opera. Yeah, it's a long way from the opera to the opera. You can spell them different. But I got to study with him, and he left. He got his doctorate, and his understudy at the Met was William Abbott. Well, he became the top tenor at the Met, and then he followed and came to my university. So I got to study with both of those tenors, which was just phenomenal. And R.G. Webb, when he got his doctorate, he left and became the top tenor for the London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Wow.
And so I got to study with some pretty big name people. And that was in addition to some of the older doctors in the college. One who I studied voice with reminded me so much of Leroy Abernathy. In gospel music circles, mainly with bass singers, you hear his name called a lot.
Yep.
And Leroy Abernathy, I think, was a genius.
Yeah. Yes.
And he knew how to get the best out of every person he ever worked with. And when I went down there with him, the whole group went down there to his place one time, and he asked me to sing a song, and he said, where did you go to school?
Wow.
And I told him, and he said, well, you can go just sit over there on the couch and watch everybody and listen to everybody. And that was about the length of my lessons with Leroy, but I did listen to everything he did with everybody else, and he was a genius.
So,
And
knowing some of your background, and I know that Brock and a lot of them would drive down and work with Leroy. How did what he taught? How did that line up with what the big guys had taught you?
it was like the old doctor and music teacher, vocal expert that was with the college. He didn't come from the Metropolitan Opera. He was there all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, my older brother and sister, they both had trained with him.
Wow.
And he taught just about the same way as Leroy Abernathy. In fact, he taught me this philosophy of how you could sing for the rest of your life and never hurt your vocal cords.
Yeah.
He said, you got to pretend that your voice that you're trying to project is like a rope. And I want you to tie a knot on one end of the rope and tie it to your diaphragm. And then I want you to bring the other end of it over the top of your mouth, the roof of your mouth, and hand it out to the audience and tie a knot on it. And they will sing for you.
Good night.
Wow.
If you sing, if you let them have what you've got, your diaphragm will release it, and it'll go flying through your vocal cords, and you will never have a vocal strain.
Now,
And I've never had a vocal strain.
I've heard you tell a story about one of those teachers, maybe at East Texas, said to watch a baby.
Oh yeah, a newborn baby. Put him on his back and watch his stomach, watch his diaphragm. Look how he breathes. He hasn't learned any bad habits yet.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
you know, we normally breathe
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
A lot of singers just breathe right here, like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Get a quick breath. Well, I get quick breaths too.
Yeah.
But when you're really breathing, you breathe through your nose and you blow it out your mouth.
Yeah.
Well, that goes with singing. You can sing forever like that and let it out as you need it. But breathe through your nose and let it out through your mouth.
I'd never heard that about Dwayne. I knew he went to school and studied music and everything. I saw there was some theater stuff in there when I was reading about it today. Some things that it just blows my mind. That
I was the Indian chief in Annie Get Your Gun.
I saw that today. I was just
didn't
thinking,
know that.
I mean,
Yeah.
But you studied songwriting and piano. Do I remember that?
Well, you have to do all of that if you get a degree in music. So I studied piano. I had a woodwind,
Wow.
and I had a trumpet, and I had a viola.
Yeah.
I studied. You have to have a stringed instrument.
Yeah.
So you have to do all of that, and if your emphasis is in composition, you really have to study all of those instruments because some of them use different positions on the clef.
So did you grow up as a family with your brothers? Did you all sing in church? Did your family, did they sing?
I was the youngest of 6 children.
Okay.
And when all my brothers and sisters got home on holidays with mom and daddy singing with us, we had a double quartet. My daddy was a great bass singer. And I did not know this until I had already had a huge success in gospel, and we'd already had major hits in country. And I learned this kind of backwards. I don't even remember how it came up. But my daddy was offered a job with the Stamps Baxter Quartet. He was a great bass singer. But his father had just passed, and he had to support his family plus his father's family. So he felt that he couldn't leave the farm and leave all of that to somebody else. So he stayed there, but I got the feeling the longer I talked with my daddy about it, because I never heard that story. I got the feeling that he was living his life through me.
I love it.
And it just made it more special to me.
Yeah, that's very cool.
There's a singer named Cindy Morgan. You've heard any of her stuff?
I haven't heard her sing, but I'm familiar with that name.
Yeah,
She, Kurt Talley, I think, discovered her originally. She was a word artist for several years. And on her first record, she had a song called "Someone Believes in Me," and it had a verse in there that said he always wanted to be a writer, but he had a family instead, and years of day-to-day living, and he gave up his dreams of music so that my dreams could come true. And now that, and I remember I didn't even know her, but the day I met her, I said, "How did you know my dad enough to write a verse about him?" Because that was my story. He gave up his dreams of music, and speaking of my dad gave up his dreams of music after I moved down here. He ended up moving down here, my mom and dad, and he was a mailman. And on his mail route was a guy named Duane Allen.
That's so funny. That
What a small world.
What a small world.
And he was a rural carrier, and he'd come home and he'd tell me stories. I saw Dwayne today. I told him that you were with the Spears. And I'm like, oh gosh, no, but you gave him a Oak Ridge Boys watch for Christmas one year, and that meant the world to my dad, which meant the world to me.
Yeah, that's so fair.
So your brother, you talked a little bit about your brother. Now he was in Zambia, is that right?
Right. That's the brother that's just over me, probably about 5 or 6 years older than me.
Nearly 40 years he was there, is that right?
He was there 28.
28, okay.
But he spent a lot of time here in the United States in different churches because he got called up to the Army during the Vietnam era twice. And they never sent him over to Vietnam because he was already married. But he always had a church that he directed music in. But every time he would get an assignment to go overseas, he would get called up. So I think he started the first place he was going to go. The name has changed now, but I believe it was British Guyana. Is that right? Yep. I believe it's a different name now. But he wound up, the second calling was to Zambia. And he has quite a story to tell there. He wrote a book that I helped him get out from the cotton fields of Lamar County to the mission fields in Zambia or something like that. It's full of short stories, like page-and-a-half short stories.
Do I remember that he got down there and they were writing songs down there or something, and maybe you helped him by teaching him about copyrights? Is that right?
Yeah, we did that over the phone, and the times when he could come home. They had their own chants and songs that they were singing, but they didn't know anything about copyright. So I taught my brother Fred how to do copyrights in Zambia. They're different than here. Right. Yeah. But I had built 3 publishing companies by that time, and I knew what it was like to work with foreign countries, and that their type of publishing was a little different. So I taught him the basics through the mail and an occasional phone call, but more than anything, when he would come home for a week or 2, I would try to make sure I could go home where we could talk.
That's great.
And he he copyrighted all of those songs that the Zambian people had been singing there over the 27, 28 years he was there. And when he left Zambia, he gave all of those copyrights to the Zambian people.
Wow.
As his missionary gift
That's
for
amazing.
his life's missionary
That's
work.
awesome. Wow.
And he gave them all to them. They're now theirs. And I don't know what they'll do with them, but they're theirs.
Now, are you giving all your copyrights away as well?
I pretty much have, but they're in publishing companies.
Yes, that's
I love it. So speaking of Vietnam, you talked about your brother and
Right.
getting called up twice. One of my favorite Duane Allen stories, and I heard this from Paul, who your son-in-law, who is one of the most amazing
great?
musicians I have ever been around.
I
And then
agree.
he raised, with your daughter, raised some pretty amazing
yes,
musician
they
kids.
are. Yes, they are.
And Dusty, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
I sure
they
have.
go by Rock and Roll.
I know. I followed them. I did. Yeah.
And the thing about them, I can't tell when I hear them play. You know, normally you say, well, he's
Yeah,
mainly
yeah.
a guitar player,
Yeah.
but he can play some drums. I can't tell what their main instrument is. They're all,
Yeah.
and they just rotate around. And
It's incredible.
am I describing that right?
That's a pretty good description. And they all play all
Yeah.
kind of different instruments.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they did their first concert was in my den, and they said, "Granddad, we want to sing a few songs for you." And I didn't know they were going to do a concert.
Wow.
I mean a whole show. I had heard none of those songs.
Wow.
None of them.
Wow.
I knew that they were working, but I thought it was just Jamie and Paul. But one by one, as the kids would walk through and Paul and Jamie were playing on the guitar or piano and singing together, they started adding that third part. And
It's
they all
crazy.
hear all the parts.
Yeah.
Cale mainly plays the piano. He studied with Brooks and Dunn's keyboard man for many years. And he's one of those geniuses that can hear something, and he's got photographic memory.
Yeah. Wow.
And he just takes a picture in his head and he can sit down and play the song. And studying, he got to where now he can do it all right. And he mainly is the keyboard player, but I love his singing voice. His voice has really matured in the last 2 or 3 years, and I really love his singing voice. Texas is mainly the drummer, but she's beginning to play the guitar as well. And she's one of those kids at 5 years old that I saw on the internet sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and I said, "Is that my granddaughter?" And where did she get those licks?
Where did she get those
Wow.
licks? Now, I don't know where she
Yeah.
would get that. Well,
Think about
No,
that
I mean, she felt them.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
She-
yeah.
there's an inherited DNA that
There's
those
something
kids,
about her that is kind of
they're amazing.
you can't train for it.
Yeah.
She, at 5 years old, she had not had any professional training, but she sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow like I'd never heard it before.
That's great.
Wow.
And then a few years passed, and they start growing up, and I put on my Facebook app, and I open it up, and here's Texas with March playing the piano. And it's just the first time they've ever done it, so there's no voices with it or anything. Now since then they've added voices and they've got a group arrangement, but this was the first time they had ever done it on stage. And she started saying, "Take Me to the King." And man, I got down to about
It's a great
the
song.
chorus, and church was out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I just lost it. Here's my granddaughter, my grandson. I mean, what could you pray for?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
it
good.
just, and she's singing, "I don't deserve this,
Yeah.
but just take me to the King."
Which is a great song.
They are, and they're the real deal musically, but they're also some of the nicest people I've ever been around. So I know that's a detour of the Vietnam story that I was headed to, but that's a good detour. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. So the Vietnam story, you were drafted, and you get to the induction. You're going.
I'm in the Army.
Yeah, in the Army.
I rode the bus from Paris, Texas to Fort Worth with
And you
45
quit 3 jobs, is that right?
Well, I quit the Prophets. I was with the Prophets.
Okay,
But you were doing like a weekend DJ or something?
Oh, I always had some kind of show. Yeah, I've had DJ shows with the Oak Ridge Boys, distributed, sponsored by Heartwarming Records, and recorded right out here at Rockland Road.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Prophets, Dusty?
No, but I was going to ask. I never followed them, but I knew that he was with them. But I don't.
It was like a proving ground for.
Yeah.
They had more good singers go through that.
I had heard that, but I didn't.
You replaced Ed Hill, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And he came back when I left, but Joe Muscale was the keyboard man. Dave Rogers from Paris, Texas, who I'd sung with before in Paris. Roy McNeil was the lead singer. And Lou Garrison was the tenor singer, and Lou sang a full voice falsetto.
Wow.
And you had to have like a tenor singer under him singing lead because everything was pitched so high.
But at some point, the Prophets, wasn't Jack Toney with them for a while?
Well, he was with them before I was there.
And Donnie Seabolt, you remember that name? Wasn't he with the Blue Ridge?
He was a tenor singer with the Blue
Small
Ridge.
and Joe Roper, you remember?
Small and Joe Roper were with the Prophets, the first Prophets.
Yeah.
Was that your first?
From Arkansas.
Yeah.
Was that the first group you were with?
The first professional group.
Yeah.
I sang with a part-time group, a local group. We toured about four or 5 states around we were in Northeast Texas in Paris, called the Southern Airs.
Okay.
And we recorded with Lou Hildreth company, Sword and Shield.
That's so, what a small world.
We cut 2 EPs. One was just a single with a B-side. The other was 4 songs. Yeah. Then we cut an album, Singing in the South with the Oak Ridge Boys. It's with the Southern Airs Quartet.
Okay.
So why don't you pick up the story, and for the, I don't know, Dusty, if you heard this or not.
I love this, yes.
Okay. We were working in Huntington, West Virginia, I believe it was, with the Oak Ridge Boys. And Herman Harper came up to me and he asked me if I would be interested in coming to work with the Oak Ridge Boys. And I said, well, I guess so. I've got to go to the Army. I've been drafted. I'm going to have to leave the Prophets. And he said, well, is there any way you can get out? And I said, well, I passed 2 physical tests. And they called me back for the second one. I passed it, knocked it out of the park. And I'm going to the Army. My number has come up. So I left the Prophets, went through Paris, Texas, and I got on the bus at the Gibraltar Hotel in Paris, Texas, and with about 130 miles to Fort Worth, I was with a bus full of draftees, and we went into this huge room that draftees from all over Texas had come to on that day. It was full. And the sergeant was barking out orders, telling us everything. You know, if you have anything with your girlfriend or your wife or whoever is your other, you need to get it settled now, because the first few weeks you're going to all go to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training, and you won't have any time hardly there at all. But before you get there, get in touch with your people and settle all your differences before there, because everybody in this whole room is going to Vietnam. Oh boy,
oh my gosh.
You could have bought me with a quarter. And he had just kind of got that statement out of his mind, and I was kind of halfway in shock, that he said, okay, this sergeant is going to come up here and take over for a few minutes. And if he calls your name, he will tell you what to do. So the sergeant came up on stage and they saluted each other. And the sergeant said, okay, I've got legal pad here, and I've got names on it. If I call your name, go over and stand by this door, like in a church, usually got 2 doors going in the back on the side. Well, he had a door back there. He said, go stand by that door and just wait until I call all the names. Well, my name starts with an A. I was the first one he called. I thought maybe I was going to bypass Fort Polk, Louisiana, and they were just sending me now. I didn't really know what was going on. But I went over there and stood, and then when he got through calling names, there were probably 15 or 20 names out of the whole room. He came over, opened the door, and said, y'all just have a seat. There was like L-shaped church seats in there in the cubicle, that enough to hold about 15 people probably. And he said, okay, I'm going into this. There was 2 cubicles on the inside. He said, I'm going into this first one. If I call your name, come on in and have a seat. Once again, my name started with an A. I was the first. So he looked at my record and he said, is this your record? Have you passed 2 physicals? I said, yes, sir. I'm here to serve. And he said, well, looking at your record as a child, you had a heart condition and you were later treated for it and got medication for it. Is that true? I said, yes, sir, that's all true. He said, well, since everybody here is going to Fort Polk, then directly to Vietnam, if you were to get out in a dogfight or something in Vietnam and have a heart attack or any kind of heart issue, us knowing that, you could own the Army and we can't afford you.
Wow.
And I said, what does that mean? I thought maybe I'd get a desk job, or I was there, you know. I already left my job, sold it, my car, everything. That's about all I own. And he said, we're going to have to reclassify you. Well, from 1A to 1Y, which is medical. He said, we will never call you again. So, and I said, well, what do I do now? And he said, you're no longer my responsibility.
Wow.
I said, well, do you have a phone? He said, yeah, that next cubicle there's got a desk and there's a phone. You can make 1 phone call. So I called my banker and I said, man, I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. I've just got out of the Army. I need a car.
No.
And I just sold my car and paid off all my bills and had a good record with the banker. He said, well, what do you want? I said, I think I know what I want, but I don't even have the money to pay a cab ride. He said, I tell you what you do. Call you a cab company and tell him that you'll pay him when you get over to the car lot. And so I told him where I wanted to go, and he took me right there, and I told the salesman, I said, pay that cab driver because I don't have any money and I want to buy a Buick Riviera. And I bought a white 66 Buick Riviera. And my banker had told me, when you get what you want, write a counter check.
Yeah.
And here's what you put on it. And when it comes through, I'll cover it. And when you get your job and you get settled down in Nashville,
That's unbelievable.
This isn't the best part of the story yet.
yeah,
but
just call me and we'll work out a payment schedule. Well, he became my lifelong friend. I talked to him just days before he passed away a couple of years ago. We remained friends, and so I drove through Taylortown, Texas. Now Cunningham is where Mom and Dad had moved. And got what few underwear and t-shirts and jeans, whatever I had then. I got what little I had not sold or given away and put them in the car, and I headed to Nashville. And I drove all night long. And I got to Nashville about 9 o'clock, about the time people were opening up their offices. And I knew where the Oaks office was because I'd been there with the Prophets, visited their office. And it's on the 2nd floor of the RCA building where we still record in the A studio.
Yep.
And So I walked to the second floor there and knocked, and the door was open. And Pat Talon had her phone up to her ear. And she said, "Oh my God," put the phone down. She said, "Here." And she walked me into the inner room, and there they all were. They said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I came looking for a job."
No.
And they said, "We thought you was in the Army." I said, "I got out." They said, "Let's go sing."
Oh my God.
So we went over to Trinity Baptist Church and sang a couple songs, and they said, "We need about 15 minutes." They went in a little side Sunday school room. I just stayed there on the pulpit. And they came out later and offered me full partnership in the Oak Ridge Boys and the publishing companies, which had 4 songs in them at that time. And then I learned why Pat Talent said, "Oh my God, put that phone down." They had just told her, "Try to get Dwayne Allen one more time, and if you can't get him, we're going to disband the Oak Ridge Boys."
That's the part I want you to hear.
So I think it has always been a God thing.
Yeah.
And
Woo.
I take God's direction, and
yes.
I pray for
Yep, you
divine guidance every day on every major decision. We always have prayer, and I always ask for divine guidance, because there's no way I could have done all of this that we've been able to see in our career without some divine guidance. You know, just show me the door. I don't mind working to get to it or through it.
Wow.
Or after it.
So there's a couple of pieces of that story that intrigue me. One is that you get one phone call and you didn't call your parents.
Yeah. I mean,
You called your banker.
Well, because I knew my parents didn't have any money.
Okay.
And I knew I needed to get to Nashville.
Yeah.
That's
Because
amazing.
the Oaks had offered me a job, but they had gone to Nassau
Yeah.
and they were not in town. I knew I couldn't call them. We didn't have mobile phones back then.
Yeah.
And I found out later they had been trying to call my home,
Wow.
my mom and dad, but that was later.
Yeah.
And that I found it out. But it was just a God thing.
Absolutely.
There's so many
Yeah,
places I could fill in the gaps, but
yeah.
I'd also have to say, God directed me in this direction. And I've always felt that way.
Who were the Oaks then at that time? Who were they?
Herman
then?
Harper was the
Okay,
bass singer.
okay.
William Lee was there.
Yep. Okay.
Little Willie Wynn
Yep. Okay.
and Tommy Fairchild played the piano.
Yeah. Wow.
And his son, Ronnie Fairchild,
was-
has just retired from 45 years on the road with us after his death.
I remember that.
Right.
He
Yeah,
just retired.
yeah. Wow.
So you replaced Smitty Gatlin.
One of the greatest singers
Yes.
ever in
Great
gospel
singer.
music.
Great singer. Yeah.
And they made the decision that quick to not only hire you but to give you partnerships. That's a bigger deal. And in the 60 years since, you've hit the 60-year mark, right, with the Oaks.
I just started my 60 years,
That's what I was
60th year,
thinking.
May 1st.
But you have evolved quickly into the point person making the decisions, and that was some great insight on their part too, to give you the incentive, especially if they were going to fold the group if you couldn't join them.
I had to come in and start talking for the group
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And that was
Wow.
really a heavy load because
Wow.
I talk really slow and I had to make all my words count.
Yeah.
So I tried to think through everything that we were going to do for a show and how can I best introduce it with the least amount of words, because we've always felt that people came to hear the songs and not me talk. And we still did. I only talked twice on our show in a whole hour and a half show.
Wow.
William Lee pumps them up for Elvira
Yeah.
at the end.
Yep.
But I only welcome the people and say a few words because I feel like it's important that the people know that I know where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something usually about the local basketball team that just went to state.
That's
And,
great. You do your homework. You do your homework. Yeah.
yeah, because I used to put newspapers after I'd read them in front of Joe. so he would know something about every place we worked. And I'd write him notes, you need to mention this tonight.
Yeah.
Because I talked for the group for a long time.
Yeah.
But then I got Bell's palsy. And I've had it 3 times in my life. Once as a little boy, 12 years old. Only lasted a couple of weeks. And then again, after Joe had been with us a while, he was just only talking once before one song. I was doing all the talking. And then Bell's palsy hit me pretty strong then. And I put on a guitar and I started playing and being a part of the band, so to speak. And I said, Joe, take over the talking because my face is drooping and I can't pop my P's. And when I smile, it looks like a smirk. And I don't want that to be what they're looking at. Wow. Let me just sing.
Yeah.
And then it hit me again 4 days after Golden left. I got hit really hard. And my face, the left side of my face, stayed frozen for almost a year.
Wow.
We took one picture, publicity picture, and I was leaning over on Joe's shoulder like this. Because if I looked straight, I couldn't smile.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So if I woke up in the middle of the night and my eye was itching, and I reach over and scratch it, it's because the eyelid was wide open.
Yeah.
You don't know those things until you've had a stroke or had Bell's palsy or something. I've had it 3 times, and the last time it did a number on me. And I eventually got all of that back, but that year I had to record an album with Steve 5 days later after it hit me, and I had to record it using this side of my mouth. That's the first album I cut with Steve Sanders. I cut it with half a mouth. And we had to still go back in. It was the first time we used digital. Jimmy Bowen was producing.
Yeah.
And I fixed most of the S's and T's and C's and things that I couldn't pop because half of my mouth was frozen. And I fixed most of them, but a few months after that album came out, D is my son. He said, Daddy, I want you to hear somebody. You got anything happening tonight? I said, no. And he said, well, we can also have a bite to eat, but he's playing up at Rivergate area in some place up there, and just a little stage, one guy with a guitar. And so while we were sitting there, he said, man, one of my favorite songs that you guys have ever recorded is well, the second verse has got, when life with its ups and downs comes, so da-da-da, all I need is you. That's the title of the song. Well, he said, why did you say wives? And I didn't remember that I did. But that's how it came out because of the Bell's palsy. I couldn't say life. When life with its ups and downs.
That's great.
And so it's still on the record. That's one that we meant. Well, it was a real word. Why? You look at the lyrics.
It makes sense.
Which one do I want to change? Well, I didn't realize I couldn't say why. I couldn't say life. It came out wife. Wow. And it's still on that album.
I'm going to go look that up.
I love it. And the internet is not known to get all the information correct. So they, nowadays they just post what they think it sounds like. One of my favorite internet things is there's an old song called Where the Soul of Man Never Dies. You remember that?
I do remember the song, yeah.
So, do you remember who wrote it?
William T. Golden.
William M. Golden.
William M. Golden, right, okay.
Billy Michael Golden. But on the internet, if you look that up, it says William Lee Golden.
Yeah.
Okay, like he wrote it back in the 1800s or something.
That's funny.
But they get it close, and that's good enough. And
a recording has always been so much fun to me. It's the reason I've now built 5 or 6 studios. I've got one in my house. My son has the upstairs at my house. He's got a studio there. He brings people in all times of the day recording, and he writes and records. And Jamie and Paul's got a studio down in the middle of town in a building that I own, and but it's a full recording studio. And then Nora Lee and I built in the garage because the boys wanted their own place to record. So the garage is air conditioned and is a recording studio too. And they can talk to each other.
That's so
The first time I ever went in a studio, when I moved here, I was 17 years old. First studio I ever went in was over on Rockland Road. You want to tell the story of that room?
Well, that was actually a tile company. I bought from Singer Tile Company. I bought that studio, and its address was Louise Avenue.
Right.
I didn't really think that sounded like a recording studio address. It's on Louise Avenue. Well, wait a minute. But it's also on Rockland Road. And so I just took a chance. I decided I'm going to put up a mailbox, and I'm going to have some letterhead printed up, and I'm going to send me a letter and see if they deliver it. So they, it wasn't in the city yet. City hadn't taken it in. It was later grandfathered in.
That's great.
But I put out a mailbox, put 329 Rockland Road on it, and I wrote myself a letter on letterhead, and the postman delivered it. That's how that address was born.
That is
That's
because
great.
I felt like Rockland Road was a better name for a recording studio.
It does sound like a cool.
It almost sounded like rock and roll.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly
when did it
right.
become Superior?
It started as Superior.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was always on Rockland
Yeah,
Road.
right.
I built the studio in 70.
Okay.
And the front part of the studio where the offices were, that's where they displayed all the tile and everything for bathrooms and kitchens and stuff, and there was offices up there. And the next room was kind of like nothing, and I made that into a shipping room.
Wow.
And then but the back part was a warehouse where they kept all of the material and everything. I looked around at that, popped my hands a couple of times, and I thought, yeah. So I went over to Woodland. I went over to studio over here on Gallatin Road, and got those same guys that built that studio to build the inside of mine, and it's still the same thing that I put up there.
Was the engineer been a guy named Jimmy Tarbutton?
Jimmy Tarbutton was my second. My first one was Bud Billings. Let's see who the group. He came from San Francisco, and he fly like an eagle, eagle, eagle. He was the engineer on all that.
Wow.
You know. And we built a Westwood studio control room first, and then we built. We went to 24 channels and built another studio. So there's 2 studio control rooms with that studio.
Right.
We went over to the side and built a hanging studio where there was no support, because we've got that railroad running down through there, and it just jarred the whole area. So we made a freestanding studio there on the side. And if you've ever been in, well, it's not there now, but we had these sound breakers that looked like Venetian blinds. As you put them up, it would just like break up the sound where it doesn't roll. That's the first studio that ever had them.
Wow. And who owns that studio now?
Ricky Skaggs. He still records down there.
I was with Gaither Vocal Band about a couple of years there. I didn't know that's what I love. This is what I love.
Yeah.
This is what I
And
love.
that's where they filmed the new Gaither DVD for Jimmy Fortune.
That's right. And we also did Elvira with Home Free in that studio.
Okay, I was going to ask, did you do a lot of Oak Ridge Boys stuff
We've recorded
there?
a lot of Oak Ridge stuff there since then.
Yeah.
There was a season when Eddie Crook just block book that thing for
Yeah.
months at a time. That's
He bought all the weekdays 10 and 2.
That's right.
And they had all the nights, which a lot of my friends by that time were nighttime people. And they'd come in, because I was working with writers, and they'll write all day, and then they want to cut demos at night. So sometimes we record all night.
So you talk about, I was thinking when you were talking about the Metropolitan Opera, do you remember the original name of the Oak Ridge Boys? It was something like Wally Fowler and the Georgia Clodhoppers.
Clodhoppers, right. They needed a name change pretty bad.
They did. I wonder what some of those Metropolitan Opera guys would have thought about their prize student being a part of the Clodhoppers. Is it?
I don't know that I had that in my mind at that time, but I think they would both laugh because they both had a great sense of humor, and they knew what I was there for, and they knew that I didn't want to go to the Metropolitan Opera. And the best way that I could describe it to them is I don't want to wear a tux and bow tie all the time. I will wear it for special occasions and respect the occasion when I do. But I want to either wear a suit and tie or I want to dress formally but casually.
That's what I remember.
And that's the people I want to get to are those people that dress like that.
That's great. And I think it's going to work out.
And they understood it.
So
go ahead.
Okay. So you joined the Oak Ridge Boys and you have ownership and everything. At that point, were you guys with Benson Company Heartwarming at that point, or did that come a little bit later?
We had to finish an album first of all with Skylight Singing.
Okay.
And that album has about half me and a half Smitty on it.
Okay.
They'd started the album. I had to finish that album to finish the contract. Then we had another offer from United Artists. For them to do an album on us, and we didn't learn till later. They were ready to start a whole new gospel thing, but I didn't know that because I wasn't in on any of the dealing to get that deal to the next album that we cut. But we cut the second album for a United Artists record label, and the third album that we cut was, I can't remember which one it was first. We had 2 new albums coming out. So we came up with and if I say too much,
no, I love
please,
it. No,
please
we know.
Excuse that. I know where I've been and I know what I've done and I know what we've done. But sometimes I use I more than we.
It's okay.
And I'm definitely one of the Oak Ridge Boys, and I choose it that way.
You do,
But if I'm telling a story, it's easier to stay first person because I know how it all came down.
That's exactly right.
You're doing
Well,
great.
there's an album called Songs We Wish We Had Recorded First. And we did hit songs by the Blackwood, Statesman, Spear Fan, everybody. We just did familiar songs that were hot maybe 5 years to 10 years before that time. And and I convinced them to go to Heartwarming. Herman was already talking with the Bensons. They were good friends. And the Prophets had recorded on Heartwarming, so I knew all about them and loved what product they were putting out. So I pushed that pretty hard. But Herman was managing the group at that time, and you didn't have to push Herman because he was probably already there when you got there, because Herman was really great. He turned out to be one of my very, very best friends, ironically singing with my wife on the Grand Ole Opry for another decades of years.
She's incredible.
She was on there for over 42 years. And we loved Herman. In fact, one of his sons, his young,
Jeff is the youngest, I think.
Clay's the second son. And Jeff and,
Ed.
Two of the boys run the Harper Agency now, Ed and Jeff.
Yeah.
My best
They're
friends.
both still friends.
Yeah.
We talk, not real often, but ever so often. If I can find some old video or something, I send it to them.
I love
with their
it.
daddy
I
in it.
love it.
We interviewed Ed on this podcast.
And he talked about
it was
his
the
dad.
first interview he'd ever done.
Yep. Yep.
And you'd probably enjoy hearing some
Yes.
of it because it was a lot of the old stories about his
And he
dad.
talked
at the
about how
Oaks.
much his dad loved the Oaks and just that was
Well, Ed is his mannerisms and everything remind me so much of Herman.
Yes.
But Clay, when you look at him, you think Herman
Yes.
Harper.
okay.
And Clay still works with me.
Okay.
And he's in Alaska right now.
Yeah,
he
I've
and
not
his
met
wife.
Clay. I know Jeff, but I've never met Clay. So
Well, Clay tried the agency thing, but he really just likes to fix things. And so that's my man.
That's great. That's
Clay's
great.
like become a part of my family
great.
at an early age and never went away.
Yeah.
And he helps me take care of the house and just about anything.
That's
He
great.
can
That's awesome.
help me do anything. I love Clay. I love all the boys. They're all great boys.
They are. Yeah.
And they're continuing on. Their daddy would be very proud of each of the three of them.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about your some of the things you studied composition and you wrote some. Probably the biggest song would be.
He did it all for me. Is getting another round. I think I did that. Wrote that over 50 years ago, I guess. And Signature Sound had been talking to me for probably 3 or 4 years about Ernie said, I want to record this song. I love this song.
Wow.
But then he started adding a caveat to it and saying, but I want you to cut it with us.
Yeah.
So then we had to find a time. Well, we found a time that I blacked out the weekend with the Oaks. It was in May, I believe, of last year. And we went to Memphis, where they have the quartet convention now. And Ernie had worked out a deal that in the afternoon he would do a full set, a full show, and record it all. It would all be recorded and available for people to purchase. And there were several guests on. The Blackwood brothers were on there.
Right.
But that place is where I came to my first National Quartet Convention. So there were a whole lot of things happening in my head. My wife had just passed, and I didn't know how I would be accepted by the gospel music people. And all of that went just the opposite. It went so good that it became just magical.
Yeah, it was.
And Ernie has asked me if I will do that again at the National Quartet Convention.
Which would be so good.
And I will be there Saturday.
Great. That's awesome.
You will be there earlier than
I'll
Saturday
be there
because
on Tuesday.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yes.
right. That's
because
right.
you are the newest inductee in the Southern Gospel Music.
Yeah.
And that came as a surprise. I didn't even know that I was up. I didn't even know there was voting that included me at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I got a call, I believe, from Aaron Rich.
Yep.
And
It was wonderful. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes.
and then you guys came out on the stage, and Aaron didn't really tell me what it was. You know, I just did an interview with him for the Singing News. But he had touched on it, and it went right by my. I think I said, I think that's past. I don't think that.
You know what
will
you're
ever
going to
happen.
find out at Quartet Convention?
So lovely.
Is that you got a big old family that can't wait to see you again.
Well, that's great. I'm looking forward. I'm going to be there. I've got to leave a couple of days and go do a couple of shows. One of them's in Pigeon
Of
Forge.
course he does.
Uh,
I love
But we're working. There are 2 days out, so I'm going to drive over early and be there for a couple of 3 days.
That's great.
And then I'll be back. I got to do a date with the Oaks, and the second date's in Pigeon Forge, and I'll stay over and I'm going to ride home with Signature Sound on their bus. They're going to bring me home.
I would have thought your biggest song as a writer would be "It Won't Be Long."
That was a big song too. There was a period of time when I came with the Oak Ridge Boys that William Lee Golden had one lead. I Know Who Holds Tomorrow.
Yeah, great.
So I wanted to change all of that. I wanted to change a lot of things. The album before I came with the Oak Ridge Boys, they had gone back to using the name quartet.
Right.
And I thought that pigeonholed us, and turned out to be right. That's more associated with Southern style gospel music. Well, I wanted to make Southern style gospel music so good that nobody could deny it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's and I probably took it too far.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, when you look back, maybe I didn't, but ahead of the
You were
bulk
ahead of the curve.
They
of the
were.
curve,
Yeah.
and they weren't ready for that out of me or us.
Yeah.
So, looking back, I don't know that I would change anything because I don't know how I could have done it any other way. But the first thing I did was tell the group, we don't ever need to use the name quartet again. We own both names.
Yeah.
But you have experimented with the boys before, and that caught my attention.
Interesting.
And I really liked that you had called it, and we actually experimented with calling it just the boys. We experimented on a few, not on album covers, but just different promotion. The Mighty Oaks, well, that one kind of stuck. We call our band the Mighty Oaks Band.
Yeah.
That one kind of stuck. But we never used the quartet name again.
Yeah.
And we just stuck with Oak Ridge Boys. I said, we need to pick something and stick with it. And Bill, well, when we were looking for a logo,
I was going to ask about that.
I looked at Chicago.
Yeah, I
You
love
can
it.
see it.
I looked at Chicago and I said, I love that Chicago logo.
Yep.
If I see that in the dark, there's the outline of that, I can almost tell you that's Chicago's logo.
You're right. You're right.
So we got the guy who made that logo.
Interesting. I was going to ask who did that.
And
It's iconic.
He
It is
did the Oak
iconic.
Ridge Boys logo, and we trademarked it.
Wow.
So
and how long ago was that?
that was in the Columbia recording studio days after we left Heartwarming.
Hey, we hope you are enjoying this interview so far with Dwayne Allen. It just keeps getting better and better. Take a break if you need to, but hang with us. I promise you won't regret it.
That is so true. And while you're at it, if you're watching this on YouTube, go to the little bell and ring it, subscribe. We want to hear from you, and you can subscribe to YouTube right now.
Now back to our interview. Did you ever do a record on Vista?
Oh yeah, that was
This
their
was a
budget,
part
like-
of Heartwarming.
Yeah,
it
it was
was
like
like
an
a,
entry
it was like a
level or
budget.
budget
They
record.
would a lot of times they would move some of the. They wanted to get it into those big box chains for Sears back then,
that's
carried
right.
music. So I mean, I bought several Vista records from
I
the
love it.
Rambos,
Yeah.
Oak Ridge
Spears
Boys,
had some.
yeah, Spears.
So it won't be long. If I remember right, wasn't that recorded by like the Hensons and the Happy Goodmans? And I bet the Hensons were known for their writing. So for a guy to get a song on the Hensons,
Howard Goodman cut It Won't Be Long for me, and I just cherished that cut. I just loved his voice.
do you know the story about the sheet music on that happened a few weeks ago?
No.
So, again, I'm a fan. I told you that when you walked in the door today. And I collected music as a kid, the sheet music. I'd stand in line at the Lloyd Orrell concerts up in Michigan and buy it. And so I had the sheet music of It Won't Be Long with Noel Fox on the cover. And even though you wrote it, so several years ago, I took that by the Oaks office and I just said, if Dwayne doesn't have a copy of this, I'd love to give it to him. If he does have it, I'd love for him to sign it and I'll come back and pick it up. So I waited way too long, and I stopped by there. It probably close to a year later, and they said, we don't remember that. We don't know. So about a month ago, I'm down at the Mexican restaurant here, and I run into Paul and Jamie, and she says, I got something for you. She said, we were cleaning out some stuff at Daddy's house. And she said, I found an envelope with that music and it had your name and number on it. And you signed it and they brought it to me at church the next Sunday.
How about that?
So cool.
So that's a big deal to
Yeah,
me.
well, it's a big deal to me too. There was a period of time when I came with the Oaks, and I started on this a while ago. William Lee had one song, I Know Who Holds Tomorrow. And Herman mainly had walk-up words like to glory, to heaven, brother, like that. Walk-up part.
I love that.
And sometimes he would sing verses, but it would usually be a second verse, kind of like, and it was almost like Willie or Smitty don't want this, so why don't Herman do it, okay? It was almost like throwaway. But Herman always sang his butt off. I just loved Herman singing. But he didn't have any feature songs, so I started writing. And I would write a song and make sure that the melody in the verses was very simple, because when you sing low, you don't want to sing a lot of lyrics and a lot of different melodic lines, because it's hard to understand down that low and you'll get lost in the music. So I wrote songs. I wrote Hear Him Call, and mine's going blank. I guess I usually use the word, that's a senior citizen talking, and I get by with it, okay? But I wrote about 3 songs during that time. Without God, that's another one.
I thought you meant you wrote Without God.
No, that's the title of the song. And I looked for songs that would have what I was looking for Herman and then Noel. And it basically said, I want songs that have a simple melody with not a lot of words in the verses, but I want you to sing it an octave lower. And we'll come in on the choruses and we'll drive it home. And maybe the third phrase of the chorus, you come back in and sing a line, then we'll all end it together. Okay, that was the format. I started looking for songs like that, but I couldn't find them, so I had to write them.
Goodness.
And so I started writing those songs, and I wrote about 7 or 8 songs and I didn't write this one, but we're still using the same format for Richard on Dream On. Yeah. Just think of how he does it. Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find that during those times, so I wrote them myself. And then I Met Jesus as one, and that was a big song back then.
It's a good song. Yeah.
And there's 3 titles I just dug out right out of my head, out of the graveyard.
Awesome. It is.
But running a publishing company and building a publishing empire, which I put quotations around it because I don't want you to think that I'm calling it that. It's just that in my mind, I wrote all this down in a college music 101 class of what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And that was just a check-off point. And I've been able to do everything that I wrote down in college music 101 in my workbook. And the title of the group was the Revelman. That was one of the groups I had, one of 3 in college. And I don't think I've ever told anybody about that. But I wrote down everything that I wanted to, the recording studio, publishing company, everything. I wrote it all down.
Wow.
And I've been able to check off all of the, I was able to check off all of those before we ever sang a country song. So my dreams since gospel music have been, okay, Ace, back up in your chair. This is God talking, and we got more for you. So you get everything in your life straight, and I'm going to bless you. And if I could have heard a voice saying that any more plainly, I don't know how I could imagine that, because I feel that God has had his hand on everything that I've done since 6 years old, when Mother told the rest of the family. I can hear him singing from way down in the bottom of the cotton field. I can hear him singing all the way up to the top of the hill on the other end of our 160-acre farm. And I knew every song that everybody did, and I was just praying that one day I would get to be in those groups. I never wanted to be Duane Allen and the Somethings. I've always wanted to be a part of one of the boys.
Oh my God.
Let's talk, if you don't mind, and you tell us when we've gone too long. This is fascinating.
No, this is incredible.
I want to talk for a little bit about your song instincts, because you talked about, well, you wrote this because you needed it, and so it's that easy. I just write this because I know it. But you understood it from a composition standpoint. You knew how to. So we had Gordon Jensen on for an interview recently, and one of the things he talked about was when he wrote "Redemption Draweth Nigh," that you wanted to sign that, but there was also a song that you heard. And it was like at RCAB or something. You went down where they were recording the Orels or something. There was a song called "The Coming of the Lord Will Be Today." Mm-hmm. And if I remember Gordon's story right, he said that you said "Redemption Draweth Nigh" will be the bigger song, but it's going to be a slow. So the Oaks are going to cut "Coming of the Lord Will Be Today." Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah. Right. I cut both of them, actually.
And then, and he talked about you were spot on. And I said, so he didn't sign those. He said, no, we got our deal with Heartwarming. And I said, how did Dwayne feel about that? He said, well, he wasn't very happy, but he was right about the songs. Now, if that's true, now fast forward, you heard a song in 1966, if I remember right, and the writer had recorded it. It was the title of his album. Yeah. And his name was Dallas Frazier. Right. And you remembered that
with
song.
The Prophets.
Yes.
The early part of the year, before I got drafted, Joe Mascayo and I would come from Knoxville, Tennessee, where the Prophets were based. We would come to Nashville, and we would live on Music Row for about 2 or 3 days, getting songs for future Heartwarming record. And we cut a one album, trying to just make up to good publishing companies back in the back of Cedarwood when they had their office on Music Row. It was just a demo studio. That album actually eventually came out on Canaan. I wrote 2 songs on that album. But Joe and I would come and stay at the Noel Hotel, and it had a speaker on the wall, and it only played one station, WSM. And after we'd been out working the streets and looking for songs at publishing companies all day long, we would come in exhausted. And I would lay awake thinking of maybe someday I'm going to make it on that station and be... like Marty Robbins was there that night. He would play everybody's hits and just stay there all night. Tex Ritter was co-host. Ralph Emery was the host. And in walked this young guy that had just had a big hit with the Hollywood Argyles. He was the lead singer of that group, Alley Oop. Wow. He had just had that hit. Mm-hmm. And he had this song that he wanted to do, and he was going solo. Well, he sang Elvira, and that was in 1966. 15 years later, it became the #1 song in country, then in rock and roll, or top 40. And when I heard it, actually, I got a call from Ron Chancey, and we were about finished with our album. And he said, Don Gant was in Texas, and he heard a bar group do this song, and he thinks if you'll do it this way, and how it wound up, and Chancey put some of his ideas, and we all threw in ideas. But he said, I got to play this song for you. He came over to my house. He said, can you get the boys together? Had everybody there by the time he could come across. I think he lived downtown by then. So he came to the house and played that song. Well, I remembered more than half of the song. Just one time.
Wow.
And the remembrance value of that song is so enormous. You cannot forget it. It's like an earworm.
That is the truth.
Yeah. And so that helped me develop some of my
Oh my gosh.
it really reinforced some of my beliefs that remembrance value is what you look for in a song, because you only get about a verse and sometimes a chorus with people listening to it, and they'll turn you off in their head and maybe turn the dial if it's on radio. So that's one of the things that I look for.
Wow.
And it has to be structurally written, like your first line of your verse sets the scene. The second line is a reinforcer of that scene. And the third line is another view of that scene. And the fourth line takes you into the chorus, and you should hear the hook line in the first line of the chorus, because the structure of songs, and I used to teach all of my writers that were writing for our publishing company. I bought this old building and restored it on 19th and Grand. It's still going. It was up for condemnation, and I got it out of condemnation and restored it and built onto it, actually. The Rambos were co-renters in there at one time with us. We had our publishing, our Oak Ridge Boys offices there, but upstairs I found that there was a loft up there, and it was full of soot, because it was they used the old coal fireplace, and the black soot was up there. So I found this company that had some light brown insulation, and I let the exposed beams stay as they were, which were black with soot. And I put these light tan brown looking things in between them, and it looked like an old church when we got through with it. The whole writer's room upstairs, and I put shag carpet up to 3 feet on the wall.
Of course,
And all the writers loved it so much they would come down there and write, and they'd fall asleep, stay all night there. But they wrote some great songs in that place.
But okay, the song Instincts, and so Elvira, you heard and remembered it 15 years.
Well, when Ron played that for us, Richard had heard it, William Lee had heard it, but Joe had never heard it. So if you listen to anybody that does Elvira after our recording, they'll probably go up on Elvira. Right. Well, the original goes down. Elvira, Elvira.
Wow.
Okay, well, that's the way Joe felt it. And so he
how'd that work out for him?
He changed that melody, and if you hear anybody going up on the end of Elvira,
you know where they learned it.
You know where they learned it, and because the original is not written like that.
Okay.
So,
Dave, this is too good.
Go
this
for
is
it.
too. I was 19 years old, maybe 20. I went to Magic Mountain. I'm from Idaho, and I grew up, not churched, but I got saved. But I remember I was when I did get saved, the Rambos, the Downings, Lanny Wolf Trio, and the Oak Ridge Boys, because they dressed so cool on those Hartwood bell-bottom pants. I can remember, I didn't really knew. I could see Dottie Rambo had written songs on some of the earlier albums, and so I bought it because of that. But I bought it because of their clothing, because I thought they dressed. But I went with a youth group to Magic Mountain in California. And it was Andre Crouch. Just happened to be Christian Music Day or whatever it was called. And it was the Oak Ridge Boys, and Elvira had just come out. And they were still doing some Christian stuff. I mean, and the place was packed out. It was Andre Crouch, and the disciples and you guys. Do you remember? I mean,
Yeah.
And I remember our youth group. It was Pentecostal. We walked in and they started singing Elvira. I watched that audience.
The crowd just went.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The crowd went absolutely crazy. And I remember even Andre Crouch, I can remember to this day, him walking to the side of the stage and watching him and Sandra was playing the tambourine while they were singing, and he was just jamming to it.
That's awesome.
And I thought, that's where then all of a sudden I would start going back and listening, getting all their the music.
So talking about song instincts, one of the things that you guys have always done, and I know usually when there's 4 people in a group, you get 4 votes on a song, and but your song instincts are so good that I would assume that drove a lot of the records through the years. But you guys did something that I wish Nashville still did, and you've done it all the way through. And Dusty, you're an A&R guy, so I have a pet peeve. When an artist will say, "Man, I love that song, but that's not us."
Yeah. Oh, I hate it.
And what you guys have all the way through, you heard a great song and you said, "Let's make it us." Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
You did 4-part stuff on songs that nobody would have heard that way. Yeah. You took it and owned it, even like "Sail Away." Kenny Rogers had cut that. You guys had the cut on it, and it was 4-part.
But I didn't know he'd cut it.
Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we were working with him.
Wow.
But that album, or that whole album, I'd heard his singles on there because we were working with him. We were doing the Full House tour.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that he had cut it. And later, he told me I was going to put that out as a single. And I said, "Well, I'm really sorry, but I'm not sorry."
No,
Exactly right.
He said,
I
"No,
love
we had."
Kenny Rogers. You had the cut on it, though.
Well, let me tell you something funny about that. We cut that song, and it was pitched to us, and it was the last song we cut on that album. And so you have to have the right pickup lines to go into each verse,
Right.
or it doesn't make sense. So we recorded it, and we headed out on the road. We got out the first day out, and Ron chanced me and said, "Ace, we got a problem. Can we, do you know of any studio out there where you are?" And I said, there weren't studios like everywhere like they are now.
Yeah.
And I said, "Ron, I have no idea. What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, when you go into the third verse, you're supposed to say, 'Then a smile comes upon me.' And you said, 'But a smile comes upon me.'
Changes the
and
song.
it don't work." And I said, "Well, can you sing those notes?" And he said, "I probably can." And I said, "Then I want you to go on another track and cut Then and
Amazing.
splice it in." And nobody's ever noticed it.
Oh my.
But when that song became a #1 hit, we presented Ron Chance with the Then Award.
That's
That's awesome.
Had it all made up and everything.
That is awesome.
Presented
Those
it
are the
as the
stories.
#1 part.
I listened to those records.
I know, me
and
That's
too.
Ron
never would have
Chance.
Wow.
heard that.
Wow.
So your song instincts, and if you went, one of the things, so back in that day, Cash was involved, and he was encouraging you guys. And in fact, I wondered, if I remember right, your last gospel record before Y'all Come Back Saloon was, you had a Cash song on there, What on Earth, right?
She's so heavily minded, she's no earthly good.
But you also had an A.P. Carter song on there about Glory Train. Is that right? And I wondered.
Not sure.
It was. I think it was the
That's
last.
the Last Train to Glory.
Last Train to Glory.
That was a new song. One of our writers wrote
But
that.
didn't A.P. got writer credit on that? Is that
That was a mistake.
interesting?
Look at the two of you. That's amazing.
That was a
That-
mistake.
Wow.
Yeah,
And then,
good call.
Yeah.
and then somewhere in the, so I wondered if, okay, was that transition already started? But then you went directly from writers like you cut Dottie's, I think Mama's Teaching Angels How to Sing.
It's on a new album. I started to bring y'all a copy, and I forgot about it until I got to the end of the
I did
street.
not know that.
And I looked at my watch, and I hate to be late, so I said, that's going to make me late if I turn around and go get
We'll
that.
figure that out.
Yeah.
But so the first country record that you did, all of a sudden you had like Sonny Throckmorton and Rhodes. Who's the guy?
Sharon Rice,
Sharon Vaughn.
Sharon Rice Vaughn.
Wow.
You had, but Sonny Throckmorton. You had Jimbo Henson early on. You went right directly to the main country writers.
Right.
And it was like, okay,
I'll tell you that how that happened.
I'd love to hear
Me
that.
too.
Do you remember the first album? And if you say no, that's fine. I have no ego problems. I'm way past that. Do you remember a song on the first country album we did called Freckles?
Yes.
I vaguely,
It's a beautiful, a beautifully written song.
Yes.
One of the the song pluggers in town were having a hard time knowing how to pitch us coming from gospel music, because I had told them I don't want any cheating or drinking songs because I don't want to rub this career in the gospel people's noses.
You changed 2 lines on Y'all Come Back.
Oh
Song.
yeah.
Wow.
I changed a lot of lines
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah.
But I had Freckles, and I listened to that song and I examined it from one end to the other, which it could have been a hit song. It kind of was anyhow, because all of our albums are gold, so it's still a gold album. But when I got Freckles, I went to my recorder and I hooked them up, and I made 2 or 3 dozen recordings of that song and sent them. I mainly took them around to all the publishers in Nashville. And I said, you've been wondering how to pitch us.
Yeah.
Listen to Freckles.
Wow.
And so they listened to Freckles, and from that we got Easy. Didn't they really thrill me down in 1924 or something? Emmylou.
Yep.
Such a good
Every song on the Y'all Come Back Saloon album is about a woman. Every one of them.
Okay, I never saw that.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't ever even notice it, and I haven't really told that. You've never been asked that question, and it didn't evolve to that. But every song on there is about a woman, and the Y'all Come Back Saloon is about a choir singer that sings in a saloon on Saturday night.
Yep.
And there's a line in the second verse that says, lifting high his glass, and I had them right, in honor to the lady and the song.
Alcohol or something.
But, the first writing was lifting high his glass of whiskey.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to sing that in that song. So I asked for a rewrite. And when they got it to me, it was so good, lifting high his glass in honor to the lady in the song. That was great, just perfectly written, perfectly rewritten. And then you go on down, the next line says, he paid his tithes, then walked that lonesome cowboy home. Well, I asked him for a rewrite on that, and I looked out again, that he paid his check. That's what you do. You don't pay your tithes in a saloon anyhow.
Yeah.
But it is about a choir singer that is singing in a saloon on Saturday night, and there are other parallels like Faded Love and Faded Memories. And there was a play on Precious Memories at one time. We just do Faded Memories now, but there was some entry on Precious Memories, and we didn't wind up doing that like we do it every night.
Didn't Jerry House, the DJ, didn't he have a cut on that first record?
Old Time Lovin', like it was in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And we're
I'm going to listen to that record on my way home.
And you know what that's a copy of? Old Time Religion. Give me that Old Time Religion.
Yeah, you can feel it when you hear it.
Well, we cut it with that feeling.
Yeah.
We're a gospel group.
Yeah,
We're singing country lyrics.
Yeah.
Just singing songs that not necessarily were about God.
Right.
Everyday life. All the teachings of God, but not calling His name necessarily.
Okay, there's a piece of advice that you got, and if my memory's right on this, from Governor Jimmy Davis.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy became very close because Nora Lee actually did backup singing on all of the last Jimmy Davis albums with, and then when he married Anna Gordon.
Right.
Which Buck Rambo married them.
That's right.
I didn't know that.
Buck and Dottie. Buck married him.
And so when that took place, then Nora Lee by that time was singing with the Chuckwagon Gang. And she cut a couple of albums with them.
I didn't know that till today.
But Jimmy Davis was really close, and I felt like I could ask him anything. So I called him up one time. I said, Mr. Governor Davis, call him Governor Davis. We have been trying our best to get a country disc jockey to play our records, and they won't play our records. And he said, well, the reason is because you give them a song that's talking about everything that God created, you just don't call His name. But then the album, when they hear it, is a Southern gospel album. So a country jockey is not taking you seriously. He said, if you want a country disc jockey to take you seriously, cut a country record, a real country record. I said, well, Governor, we don't have many people following us, you know, what's going to happen if that doesn't work. If we cut something, you know, like I've got this song pitched to me about a saloon, a church singer in a saloon. What if that doesn't work? And he said, you know how that feels right now. I said, well, what if it works? He said, they'll all want to know you. They'll all call you their best friend.
Yeah.
And that happened.
Yes, sure did.
And
sure did.
one particular family was holding a revival in Charleston, West Virginia. The week we worked in Charleston, they called me and asked if they could come back and see us, and I said, sure. And they turned out their revival church service that night and brought the whole church.
Ooh, I love those stories.
And,
I love those stories.
And when we hugged, it was like, we've been praying for you all along. Thank you for coming. You know,
But you took a lot of heat.
Yeah, they did.
Some of it you probably heard, some of it you didn't. And I've heard you say somewhere along the way that you forgave all of that. That was their issue, it wasn't yours.
I had to, and I want to come to that. But I want to tell you something else first.
All right.
I mentioned that William Lee Golden didn't have one song. I went to Buck Rambo and Dottie, and I said, you are writing so many songs that you can't even do all your songs on your show.
That's true.
When you write a new song, if you will send it to me, I will get it with the right vocalist, and I will make sure that when we work together, if you want to do that song that night, you just tell me, because we won't double your song. But if you will give me her new songs as she writes them, I will record as many of them as I can. I gave almost all of those to William Lee Golden. He looked beyond my faults, sheltered in the arms of God.
You had a huge
when I
hit.
lift up my head, and I'll just stop there, but that's three. And that's how we got William Lee Golden out of I Know Who Holds Tomorrow, which he sang for a year as his only solo.
Yeah. Wow.
And Willie and Smitty had most of the leads.
Right.
And I wrote leads for the bass singers
Yeah.
the first few years. And then I started finding songs that could work with that format.
Incredible.
And that format we still use, by the way, today on Richard.
Yeah.
And used it on Dream On. So if you want something that you know what I'm talking about, listen to that. Okay, that's a little bit more on where we were. Now, take me back to where we were.
God, it's so good.
Well,
about the stuff they went through as far as
Yeah,
leaving
okay, just the
leaving-
forgiveness
The
thing.
forgiveness. I
Yeah,
love
the forgiveness.
that. Yeah.
But you,
You know, when we had a bunch of hits, all of these groups that had badmouthed us, they all wanted to be our friends.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Jimmy Davis told me would happen.
right.
Well, they were welcomed at our shows.
Yeah.
But I went for several years there that I was so involved in making sure that the Oak Ridge Boys happened. Our publishing companies were successful. I built a couple, 3 studios by then, making sure those were working. And I was determined to make it all work, that I was working 24 hours a day. And I had a philosophy: if you want your business to grow, you better have the key that opens it in the morning and closes it at night.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that except the days I was home. So I built all of these companies, and then I got great people to run them.
Yeah.
And built a philosophy in each one of them that I built business models. 1, 2, 3 steps. Number 1, you recognize what you want to do, or say where your problem is. Number 2, you go right to the problem and face it, or the project that you're working on. You work on all the working parts right there in the middle. Number 3, you bring it home.
Yeah.
All simple business model steps. Never a 4. Why, the Oak Ridge Boys, you got 4 people. Yeah, but Richard doubling one of the upper parts. The bass part is a double. He sings the tonic of the triad.
Right.
He's doubling somebody. Unless you're in modern 4 or 5 part harmony or whatever, I can hear that too. But in the traditional sounds that we have in gospel and country, it's basically a major triad of parts with the bass singer singing on the foundation of the note, the tonic, the 1
Yeah, right.
in C, the C.
The dough.
Yeah, the do.
Wow.
You know what?
But the wall was something that I blacked out gospel music in my life until year 2000. And my wife, she said, "What are you doing this afternoon?" I said, "Name it, whatever you want to do, I'm free." She said, "Okay, let's go to my car." So we went to her car, and she took off riding. We went out north, past Hendersonville, up into the woods, and just kept driving back in there. I think Johnny Cash bought some property up here. Let's go up here. And she put in a CD, and it was Bill Gaither and the Gaither Vocal Band.
Yep.
And they were singing a song, loving God, loving each other, making music with my friends. The story never ends, okay? We sang that at June Carter Cash's funeral. But as I was listening to that album, I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
I thought, man, this is the music that I've always loved, and this is what I have basically blocked out of my mind, because I needed to do a lot of things to make the Oak Ridge Boys country music career work. I knew what they were. I knew they took a lot of time. I knew we had several side companies, and all of them needed work. Well, I went to about 2000, and I finally got tired of blocking the industry out of my head, because I would go down the road and I would listen to the radio station that played gospel music, but I paid no attention to who it was.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear the music. I didn't want to hear anything about the business, because the business part of it was what kind of
Yeah.
was not a good farewell years ago. And that's what I wanted to block out.
Right.
This woman came up to Brock Spear at a concert, And one little bitty woman coming around, like asking all these questions, came up to Brock and said, "Have you seen what the Oak Ridge Boys are doing? What do you think about them leaving gospel music?" And Brock Spears said, "I think it's the worst thing that ever happened to gospel music when they left."
Great answer.
She went, "Well," and just tootled off. She was wanting gossip.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was dealing with, and I didn't want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I had, I'm not going to say bigger or better thoughts. Let's just say I had broader thoughts.
I love that.
Because I've proven that.
Yes, you
okay.
have, yeah.
But I still love gospel music.
No, yeah, you
But I thought I've got to find another answer to this. And so I went back into my business model theory, and I decided the Bible has got to really tell me the answers that I'm seeking. And there were people in my life that had some shingles or blocks or something, that were there. And I thought, I not only need to get rid of this wall I built up with my first love, gospel music, I need to break it down. I need to learn something else, another way to deal with it. And I kept reading until I came upon what worked out to be my forgiveness theory. And the Bible tells me that if I have a problem with somebody else, we won't put a name on that person because it could be anybody.
Yeah.
And it could be a lot of people, and it could be a group of people. So let's just put it over to the side. Before I can even deal with that person, I got to ask God to forgive me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I cause this? Am I responsible? Forgive me first. And I got that. And I said, then I've got to have, that's one, I've got to take it out of this first person. I recognize a problem. And I wanted to remove the things that weighted me down.
Yeah.
All my shoulders. I wanted to remove the baggage of no matter what it is. I want to get rid of that. I want to be free. So, the second thing the Bible teaches me is you've got to look at the person who wronged you. And you've got to forgive them.
Yeah.
And you've got to ask God to forgive them. Yeah. Now, whether they get that message, you don't have to go to them. I'm working on me. I've got to figure out how I'm going to look at gospel music. Yeah. The gospel music I love.
Yeah.
So once I got to that second part, the third part is the bringing it home part. Because the Bible tells me that if you forgive someone in your heart, God will remove it and there will be a place for love to bloom again. Wow, I'm a farm boy. I know what blooming means. I know we used to plant our crops and just pray that we get through the fall and harvest those crops because that's the only way we made a living. That spoke volumes to me, and there was my three-part business model I call my forgiveness theory. And all of these people, and it wasn't that many, but let's just put a one there.
Yeah.
Once I forgave that person and asked God to forgive that person after I had asked the same of me, then God gave me the third part.
That's amazing.
God gave me a whole new place in my whole system and another way I could look at that person, the problem that had been either between us or them toward me or me toward them, no matter what it was gone. Yeah. It was just gone. It gives a place for love to bloom again. And I started applying that to every person that I'd ever met that might have spoken an unkind word about me. And God helped me to look at that. I've never forgotten any of them. They're still in my memory, but they don't affect me.
And if my memory serves me correctly, you can tell me if we can cut this out. I was there the first time he walked into the Gaither homecoming crowd, and they started singing Elvira. The whole crowd.
Of course.
And I remember you guys were so overwhelmed because they loved you.
Yeah.
That's this whole forgiveness thing. It was just like, these are our, and they did Elvira. They walked in singing, not them, the group, and then they started singing it. It was one of my favorite memories of a Gaither taping.
So many things that I wish people knew about you besides what they see on the records. Let me give you a couple examples. One, Jimmy Fortune was on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and one of the big stories is how he became part of the Statlers, and when he got the full-time job, he said the first note that he got was from the Oak Ridge Boys. And a lot of people thought there was some, but he talked about how much that meant when he started traveling by himself. The first concerts that he did, the Oaks called and said, "Why don't you come sing a few songs before our other things that come to mind?" One, when the Nealon funeral last year, you didn't go, and I thought you might be there, and I was talking to your son-in-law, and when we had breakfast, I said something about it, and Dusty, his response was, he said, I wanted to be there, but I didn't want that to be about me. It needed to be about, do you remember saying that?
Kelly loved.
I've
have
heard
a picture of us just right out here in the parking lot.
I've heard you say to young singers, you sing anywhere you can sing. And a great example of that is, I think it was 3 weeks ago maybe, you sang with the choir at my church.
Right.
You came up and did it's those kind of things that's the Duane Allen that would agree to come, and you've been through, you lost your wife of
54 years and 8 months.
On Easter Sunday,
Easter Sunday morning last year. And
then you lost William Lee's son, Rusty, about the same time. Then you lost your best friend in the world, Joe Boswell.
when the Nealon's plane went down, this is not an I story, but I'm the only one that did it. But I mentored Jason for quite some time.
They loved you.
He would send me every recording that he did to listen to for suggestions before he would do the final mix. He would send me songs he'd been pitched or that he had written and get my input on it. And he talked with me endlessly about doing the Americana type project that they did.
You're exactly right.
And they wound up doing a great project there. And I loved Jason Clark and Kelly and all the girls. Of course, Rex Nealon was my best friend. I tried to hire him 3 times.
I didn't know that.
But, well, not a lot of people do, because that might not feel good to somebody else. But it's the truth, because I loved him. I loved his singing. I thought he would fit us good.
Yeah.
The first one, he wasn't ready. The second one, he wasn't ready. And the third one, I think he thought about it, but he told me then what he wanted to do with his daughter and his family.
Yeah.
And but that third time, I tried to hire him as a publisher.
He understood the copyrights.
Oh man, he was a great song man.
Yeah.
And we talked songs. And when I was with the Prophets, he would come over to our bus, and him and Roy McNeil and I would sit in the front driver's seat up front, all 3 of us in one seat, and sing bluegrass Lubin Brothers songs.
Wow.
And Rex wanted to sing the tenor. he had another lift.
That is so
And it was
funny.
strong.
Wow.
And he could do all of those tenor
That's
parts.
great. I've never heard that.
The old, I don't guess I've ever told it.
Leuven brothers.
The old, he knew every Leuven brother. Well, there are not a lot of people that know that, but I did.
I know.
I've got their whole catalog. And the Everly
They've got the
brothers.
worst record cover, I think, in the history of music. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? Satan's For Real? Where he's holding the pitchfork.
I do remember that.
Got the
cover.
horns
yes,
on the-
Yes, I do. Remember
I don't know that I've ever seen that. I'm into their music.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
That's great.
my wife and I recorded a song on the country reunion shows with Larry Black.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When there's
yeah,
love at home.
Yeah.
That came off that old Living Brothers.
Charlie and Ira? Is that
Wow.
Ira was his brother.
Wow.
Who passed.
Wow.
Charlie kept going.
Hey, you mentioned publishing. I know we're trying to bring this to the station here, but I wish we had another 3 hours. I
This is
love the
amazing.
stories.
Me too.
What was the difference in Silver Line and Gold Line?
Silver Line was BMI, and
Okay.
and
wondered if
Gold
that was
Line and Blue Line, they were ASCAP and CSAC.
Now, how did Ben Spear end up distributing? We're talking about his publishing companies.
That was a deal made before I came.
Okay.
And we had 4 songs in the publishing company when I came. I bought in for $100.
Wow.
And
Goodness.
we had Elvis's last studio single in that publishing company.
Wow.
So it sold for a little bit more than $100.
Yeah, I bet
I
it
would
did.
think-
I think it did.
I think you did all right.
In 1 year, the year before we sold it, we were the 3rd largest company in Nashville that had the amount of charted records in Billboard.
Wow.
We were right behind
Unbelievable.
Tree and Acuff Rose.
Wow. Wow.
I came into tonight nervous because I'm such a fan, and I didn't know you that well. And Dusty said it right when we started about what an honor this has been, and we just love telling the stories. We love hearing the stories, and I can't thank you enough for spending your evening with us. And
Yeah.
Well, I hope the people like it.
They're gonna love it.
There's a lot of people that have asked me to write a book. Well, I wrote a book in the early 70s called The History of Gospel Music. I know what writing a book is all about, and the main thing that they want you to do is go out and do autograph sessions and sign the books. Well, I do that now more than I want to, and I refuse really to do them unless an autograph session is promoted like an event
Yeah.
where you get a crowd, because it's really boring to go into a Walmart in their book session and one person is there.
yeah.
But I've seen that.
Yeah.
That
Every
I didn't
artist
want,
has, yeah.
I didn't want to see that again ever. So I just told them, look, if you're going to do an autograph session, it's got to be promoted like an event, or don't do it, because it's not worth it and it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So the other 3 guys, Joe wrote over 10 books, and I'm not sure the total number, maybe 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Joe was a really good writer, and I proofed every one of those books.
I did not know that.
That's okay. I just told you. But it's not for publicity. It's just the way we worked. He would send a chapter to me and say, hey, read this. I want to make sure it's right. And we were that close. And I'm not co-writer on that. All of that is Joe. And he just asked me if he got dates right, and if he got things right. He always wanted it to be just exactly right. And I could call Joe and Richard, we own the corporation. So I might be needing to make a decision on a corporate level. And like signing a year-long bus lease.
Yeah.
Today, if you go to sign that, you're going to get up to $1 million in your contract. And that's going to make somebody responsible for that.
Right.
For an example, that's just an example. So if I needed to get a decision from Joe, the conversation might be this: "Hey Ace, what's up?" I'd say, "Joe, I've got to really make a decision today, and I need your vote." He said, "Well, you got it." So I had his vote, and then he would follow and say, "Now can you tell me what I voted for?"
That's great.
so awesome.
But that's the working relationship
Trust.
and the trust that Joe had in me and I had in him.
Wow.
And I feel the same way with Richard, and I feel the same way with William Lee.
That's great.
But William Lee, I read an article one time, he marches to the step of a different drummer. And that's a pretty good description. William doesn't look like everybody else.
That's right.
I hadn't noticed that.
That's intentional.
Yeah. Yep. You're right.
Because to William Lee, it's not. I'm not discounting
No,
his musical
not at
part.
all.
I'm just saying that if you read Tony Brown's book, William Lee inspired him
Yeah.
Right.
on how I look everywhere I go.
You're right.
It's about the look.
Sometimes.
And
Yep.
William Lee he's a dreamer,
Yeah,
and he's out front of a lot of people
Yeah.
with ideas. And I always tell him that an idea is good, but you got to put a business model to it to make
Balance it
sure
out.
if it will work and if you can bring it home. But the idea stops at number one unless you got all the working parts in two, and then the capability of bringing it home. So that's my relationship with William Lee, and he is a great person to work with.
That's awesome.
I've loved him for, all 60 years. I met him on his first trip to Fort Worth, Texas, one that I had been interviewed for, because that's a question that Smitty Gatlin, I found out later, was questioning me about when he came over to my table at the Texas Hotel. He was going to ask me if I would be interested in the baritone singing job with the Oak Ridge Boys, and I told him I've got another semester of college.
Yeah. Wow.
And they hired William Lee Golden.
Wow.
Tell me about Jesse Burt. Do you remember that name?
Yes,
Is that who you wrote the book with, the history of gospel music?
Jesse Burt was a wonderful writer, just a wonderful person. I loved him. Every minute I spent with him, I loved him. He wrote a book with Bob Ferguson called So You Want to Be in Music.
Yes.
And it was a huge seller. Well, I decided that I needed somebody professional that was known in the writing department of books. That's different than songs.
Right.
And so I called him and I asked him if he would be a co-writer with me and help me organize things I'd already collected and go through them and help improve what I had to present to him. And he wrote some of the book too.
Didn't that have like an orange cover? Orange?
Yeah, orange, red.
A couple more questions. I know I may never get this chance again. So you guys did a live record, like right
before the country.
Yes.
That was basically
It was
recorded.
all cover tunes.
It was, because we were needing something to sell. Because we were in a survival mode right then. And we recorded that in Oklahoma City at a dinner club. And I took what we recorded there and brought it to Superior Sound Studios, got all the same pickers to come in and record that with the live recording. And if it needed supplementing or changing, I had it on tracks to do that.
Okay.
Then I supplemented the applause tracks so that it sounded as close to the live performance, which it was.
Yes.
All of our tracks are live, but we fixed whatever needed fixing. And we made it as good as we could. But that was definitely a budget type album that basically we needed something to sell to
Okay.
help us survive.
Did I remember that Skip Mitchell sang a solo on there?
Yeah, probably Where the Soul of Man Never Dies,
Yes.
or something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
And if I also remember correctly,
And Charlie Daniels played the slide guitar on that.
I did not know that.
And we won a
Wow.
Grammy with that.
Wow.
What I remember most about it, if I remember right, the opening song was Rocky Top,
Yeah.
and it was the fastest.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how that was because it was before Click, but that would have been Breland
Breland and Skip and
and Garland.
Garland and Mark Ellerby,
Okay,
probably at that time.
but that do you remember that? How fast that Rocky Top
Oh, yeah.
was? Boom, 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 boom. And it never.
You know something? Let me tell you a fun story. We had Rocky Top, and we were booked in Gordon, Nebraska. And we were booked to work the downtown municipal office building, like where they have jury trials and stuff, you know, that have singings in there. And we did one show in there, and it was kind of like a secret. Wasn't many people showed up. So the promoter decided, well, you're a country group, so there's a party, dance party, taking place over at the VFW club or something like that. I'm not sure what club it was. And there usually is quite a lot of people over there, so I can get a little bit of my money back. I need you guys to go over there and play that show for me. Well, we got over there. We did Rocky Top once, and it was went over so good. This is the first time we ever ran into a dance, so to speak. And they were dancing to our music, have a little talk with Jesus. I mean, we didn't know but like 4 or 5 country songs.
Yeah.
So we ran out of them, and we ran out of all the gospel things that we could throw in. So here comes Rocky Top again. So Rocky Top appears again in our show, and they go crazy again. But this time, I think most everybody there but us was drunk. It was the first time we had ever in country music played a dance. We never played one in gospel.
That's awesome.
This is a holy dance.
Yeah, that's
And I've
so
seen some of
funny.
them running the aisles. But this was a club, and the guy was just trying to get some money back, and we thought, well, we'll go do whatever he needs to do. We don't want him to lose money. So we went over there, so we got to the end of Rocky Top the second time through. And we realized we don't have any more songs. We've already done everything, you know, that we can play. Daddy Sing Bass, everything that's close to country we did, and a lot of our gospel stuff. And they're yelling for more. So Joe turned around and said, another verse on Rocky Top. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
funny.
That's it. Okay. We did Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms, and that song fits it.
That's
You can
so
do that
funny.
in the verses of
That is funny.
Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms.
That's so funny.
We got through with the first verse. Joe and I was just kind of looking around to see if they're going to start throwing bottles or whatever, or if God was going to strike us. Because this is our first dance we ever worked.
my
We're
gosh.
doing Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms, and we're singing Amazing Grace too.
That is so.
So the people were so
Yeah.
drunk they didn't know.
Yeah.
They were just rolling in my sweet baby's arms out there. We were singing Amazing Grace, and it went over great. And all at once, Joe said, and at the end of the verse, we'd go, rolling in my sweet baby's arms, you know, go to do the chorus again. And so about third phrase before the end, Joe said, I got it. When we've been there. He did all 4 verses of Amazing Grace.
That is so
And we
awesome.
sang the chorus to Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms
That is
after
so
each
funny.
one of them.
That is so
And I don't
funny.
think anybody there ever knew it.
They
but
did.
we didn't know any. We didn't know any more country songs.
That is the best.
And we'd heard Leon Russell do "Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms" on the bus, and that's the only reason we knew that one. And there was another. The second dance, and this is the last one we did, was in Texas, and I won't say the word, but it's got 4 letters in the first word and the second word, but it's called the BS dance. And every few notes they would yell out the real word BS. And keep going another note, BS. Saying the word. And I called the agency. I said, man, I know we're trying to go country, but I can't handle these things. I know they're fun. There are a lot of people that make a living at them, but it just doesn't work with where we've come from.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable to me.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable to enough of the guys in the group that I'm going to speak for them, whether they say anything or not.
Yeah.
Don't book us on any more dances. And they haven't. So,
Thank you
Wow,
so
thank
much.
you. Wow.
This has been unreal.
We could spend another few. This
This is why we love to tell the story.
I love telling
Thank
the
you, Dwayne.
stories. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
Duane Allen. Man.